In the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension, there's a room with a watermelon hooked to a machine. Why was it there? From whom did John Lithgow model his crazy Italian accent? What was the Japanese writing on Dr. Banzai's headband when he was in his rocket car? These and other questions will be answered on this episode of
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Dr. Banzai? Yes, this is Emilio Lizardo. Maybe you don't remember me. I'm flattered. Yeah, we know the same people. Yeah, in fact, one of these is with me right now. Your associate, Dr. Penny Peretti. May I pass along my congratulations for your great interdimensional breakthrough. I'm sure in the miserable annals of the earth that you will be duly enshrined. However, Miss Peretti claims to be unable to solve my problem and provide me with the crucial missing circuit for my overthruster. Maybe you can convince her to try. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 190th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell the most famous dimensional hopping physicist, brain surgeon, and rock musician in the world about Back Look Cinema. I have always been a fan, even though I haven't ever fully watched the full movie from beginning to the end before I did this show. I've seen certain scenes and chunks of it many times, and I had at least a couple of issues of the comic book adaptation, but I never actually seen it. But I was always fascinated by it. I would catch maybe the middle of the movie or the end of the movie and be confused by what was going on, but being enthralled by what I was seeing, because I would catch bits and pieces of it on television. But this is the first time that I've actually watched the whole movie, and I actually watched it twice, because this is one of those things you have to watch twice in order to actually fully comprehend what you are experiencing. The film is really complicated, and it never quite made sense. I just love the design elements, and I like what it seemed like out-of-the-box storytelling. Many of the characters had some really weird names that I found entertaining. I love the goofiness and the campiness of the overall story. This is, in fact, billed as an action comedy. It's more of a amusing type of comedy than a laugh-out-loud funny comedy. But I'm going to share with you what I got out of it. But first, we're going to go over to the opening credits. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the 8th Dimension. I am going to do more of a synopsis of the story because there are so many moving parts in the story and so many elements that are crammed in that I want to do more of a regular synopsis than do something cutesy that I've done on my other episodes. Buckaroo Banzai is a celebrity scientist, physician, musician. He leads a group of brilliant minds who are also his bandmates in his rock band, the Hong Kong Cavaliers. As a physicist, he continues the work of his mentor, Dr. Toichi Hikida, on a device that allows travel between dimensions. During the test, he successfully enters the 8th dimension and witnessed strange beings therein. His successful test is reported around the world and alerts one of Dr. Banzai's predecessors, Dr. Emilio Lizardo, who has been incarcerated in a mental institution after Lizardo's partial successful test to enter the 8th dimension. Years earlier, Dr. Hikita, Banzai's mentor, partnered with Dr. Lizardo to develop the interdimensional device, but the test went awry, and Dr. Lizardo ended up stuck between the real world and the 8th dimension. Dr. Hikita and Lizardo's team pulled Lizardo back into the real world, but Lizardo appeared to have gone mad, wide-eyed, growling, attacking his own staff, then escaping the testing facility. It's later revealed that Dr. Lizardo hadn't gone insane, but was actually possessed by a being from the 8th dimension named Lord John Worfen. Banzai learns that Lord Worfen and the creatures that he saw in the 8th dimension were aliens called red lectroids, and they were imprisoned in the 8th dimension by their adversaries, the black lectroids. The black lectroids send Banzai and the Hong Kong Cavaliers' assistance in stopping the red lectroids from freeing the other red lectroids from the 8th dimension. The black lectroids also threatened Banzai that if he and his Hong Kong Cavaliers didn't stop the red lectroids, then the black lectroids would attack the Soviet Union and set off World War III. You got all that? Does that all make sense? Are you getting the story and also the convolution that is involved with this story? There's not going to be a test later. Don't worry. There won't be a test later. No pop quiz at the end of this broadcast. This movie was released October 5th, 1984, produced by Sherwood Productions. It grossed over $6 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $17 million, according to various sources, including 20th Century Studios.fandom.com, Asteroid G, ForgetfulFilmCritic.com. And there were other sources. This budget figure was not reported on the source that I usually go to, which is the IMDb. Now, if you adjust these numbers for inflation, the gross, that being $6 million, would be $18 million in today's dollars, and the budget would have been $52 million just for today's dollars. This is a very modest budget, and it's interesting that it didn't catch on, because it seems like a catchy movie. It seems like it would have at least got its money back, but this was an absolute bomb. And this is not one of those movies that I thought was super successful, because I wasn't even really cognizant of it until it was on television. Like, I don't remember seeing any trailers for it or anything like that until it was finally on TV. I might be wrong about that. I'm probably suffering from the Mandela effect, but I just don't really remember being cognizant of it, because I feel like had I seen the trailers, I really would have wanted to see this movie. And I would have gone to the theaters, and I probably would have loved it, even if I didn't fully understand it. The stars of this movie include Peter Weller playing Dr. Buckaroo Banzai. Peter Weller, in real life, is a doctor. He has a PhD in Italian Renaissance art history and Roman history. So, a doctor playing a doctor, that's fascinating. You may have also seen him in RoboCop. We covered that in episode 149, and I did that with Kate Baldassaro. I'm sorry, her name is KT. KT, the letter K, the letter T, Baldassaro. And she has a podcast called What If I Don't Like It? And you can also catch her on TikTok. There's also the movie Naked Lunch, and a more recent movie, Star Trek Into Darkness, and a movie called Leviathan. John Lithgow plays Dr. Emilio Lizardo / Lord John Worfen. He's been in The World According to Garp, Cliffhanger, Love is Strange, Interstellar, and Harry and the Hendersons. Mr. Lithgow's range is incredible. He can play someone who's like a nice father figure. He can play like a really crazy person. He'll also play the villain. He runs the gamut. It's like he can't really be nailed down or pigeonholed into any one type of character. Like he will play anything and anybody, and he's gorgeous at it. He's just crazy, incredibly talented. Ellen Barkin plays Penny Pretty. Obviously, it's a play on the idiom Pretty Penny, and she's been in The Fan, Drop Dead Gorgeous, and This Boy's Life. But she's mostly a television fan. Like, you can mostly find her in television and, still acting to this day on television. Jeff Goldblum plays New Jersey / Dr. Sidney Sweeble. And I'm sure you've seen him on Jurassic Park. He's also been in The Fly. We covered that in episode 49. And Independence Day. Christopher Lloyd plays John Big Booty. Or, I'm sorry, he prefers John Big Booty. And you may have seen Christopher Lloyd in Back to the Future. We covered that in episode 132. I did that with Christopher J. from the Saturday Morning Podcast. It's a great podcast if you love the old-timey Saturday morning cartoons. And also Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I need to cover soon. And the movie Nobody. I was surprised to see him in there. It was a really small role, but I really enjoyed him in Nobody. Lewis Smith plays Perfect Tommy. You may have seen him in Southern Comfort, Django Unchained, which I did not realize he was in, or Wyatt Earp. Clancy Brown plays Rawhide. This is like the most normal I've seen Clancy Brown play a character. Like, he's played normal characters, but there are always a little bit something to his characters. But Rawhide is such a normal guy. And you may have seen Clancy Brown in The Shawshank Redemption and Starship Troopers. He's always been delightful when I see him on screen. Carl Lumley plays John Parker, and you may have seen him in Men of Honor, or most recently in Captain America: Brave New World. Vincent Scavelli plays John O'Connor. You may have seen him in Ghost or Fast Time at Ridgemont High. John Hedaya plays John Gomez, and you may have seen him in The Usual Suspects or Alien Resurrection. I covered that in episode 124 with Rod and Karen from the Black Guy Who Tips podcast. So this is, as you heard, a stat cast. Like, I think a lot of these people were unknown when this movie came out. I think Peter Weller was a little bit known. I can't remember if it was before or after RoboCop or around the same time as RoboCop. But like John Lithgow, this is so early in his career that he had brown hair. Well, actually, I think he still has brown hair. I don't know. It just seemed like his hair was fuller in this movie. He may have been wearing a wig, but I don't know. It didn't look like a wig to me. Jeff Goldblum was much younger. Everybody was much younger, but it's like, I feel like Jeff Goldblum was like noticeably younger, along with Christopher Lloyd. Christopher Lloyd, he definitely had brown, it's like reddish brown hair. This is the first time I've seen Christopher. No, it's not the first time I've seen Christopher Lloyd before his hair turned white, because I used to watch Taxi all the time, and I'm pretty sure that his hair was like dark brown or reddish brown in Taxi. But those aren't strong memories, so it's delightful to see Christopher Lloyd in this early film role. And so everybody looked like it. They weren't unrecognizably young, but to see him in these early roles, it gives me the suspicion that they were relatively unknown. I think it's one of the reasons why the film budget was so low, like $17 million back then. That's a pretty low budget film. And so you think that the film's budget was low enough where they could make a profit. This looks like a film that should have made something around maybe $50 million, but it didn't. It failed miserably, and that's a sad thing. I think this, and it's celebrated now. This is a cult classic now. This is a much beloved film now. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to cover this film, and the other reason why I wanted to cover it was that I have always been fascinated by this film and also intimidated by it because of its complexity. So this movie was directed by W.D. Richter. There's only one other movie that he's credited for, and that's called Late for Dinner. And he's known more for writing movies. So he's wrote movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I'm pretty sure that's the original version. Big Trouble in Little China, one of the movies I loved, and Home for the Holidays and Needful Things. I'm not sure if I saw that movie, but I definitely read the book. This movie was written by Earl MacRaunch, and he's written stories such as New York, New York, and that's a movie starring Frank Sinatra, A Stranger is Watching, and Wired. But none of the movies that he wrote were profitable. It's surprising that, and it's like, I don't know whose fault it was that his movies weren't profitable. Was it because of his writing, or was it because of the director, or was it because of studio interference? I don't know, but it's kind of a common thread when you look at his entire IMDb. None of his movies made a profit, and that's a sad thing. The music was composed by Michael Boddicker, and you may have heard his music in movies such as Whitewater Summer, The Adventures of Milo and Otis, and there is an original song in this movie. It's called Since I Don't Have You by Peter Weller. It's written by Joseph Rock and James Beaumont with the Skyliners. And there's also there's another original song, and I think I wrote about that in the trivia. We'll find out. I should have gone over these notes before I started the show, so I knew what I was doing. But in any case, that's it for the opening credits. And I don't have any announcements really, except please check out my shop at backclickcinema.com/shop. And also still working on the eBay shop, Bazaar de Alonso. Now, let's get into our favorite parts. Trying to find a theme for this movie is a little bit difficult. It's just one of those movies where pinning down a theme, especially something like this type of comedy, pinning down a theme, it's a real challenge. But I think that one of the themes is no matter where you go, there you are. That is the pinnacle line of this movie. If nobody remembers anything about this movie, they'll remember that line. That is a line that really penetrated the zeitgeist. That I think this is the line. This line is one of the reasons that it was elevated into cult classic. And what does it mean? I'm not exactly sure. I think it means exactly what it says it means. No matter where you go, there you are. And this movie goes everywhere. It goes through dimensions. It goes through space. It goes across several cities. Not necessarily. It doesn't really go across different countries or different continents, but it not even across different states, I don't think, but it goes across different cities. I think the whole movie, the setting takes place across a couple of cities. I think there's also a lesson in trust in this movie. There's a lot of trust that Buckaroo Banzai has in his bandmates, and there is a lot of trust that his band has for Buckaroo Banzai. Even when he does something strange or unusual, they trust him implicitly, and they keep that trust within themselves. They don't necessarily trust people outside of their core group. They keep it pretty tight. They have a network of fans that are basically, it's more like a defense arm. They're kind of like the Boy Scouts, and they extend this trust to their auxiliary, like Boy Scout units. I think they call it the Banzai Buccaneers or something like that. I can't remember, but they're little auxiliary groups that act as their quasi military arm whenever they need extra support. So it's that trust that goes throughout the film. The members of the band, they trust each other. They trust Banzai. Banzai trusts them, and that's basically how they get things done. Earlier, I've kind of gone over the broad strokes of the film. There are several things that I noticed. I noticed that this was like shades of They Live. I'm not sure when each movie came out. I feel like They Live came out probably a little bit earlier than Buckaroo Banzai. But one of the premises of both They Live and this movie is that there are aliens among us disguised perfectly as human, and the protagonist gets the ability to see these aliens among us. So in They Live, there's a special pair of glasses that the protagonist wears, and he can see the aliens, and he goes out and tries to eliminate the aliens. And these are alien invaders. These aren't friendly aliens. And in this movie is pretty much the same premise, where there are aliens among us trying to get back home. It's like there are implications that they're trying to take over the world, but they're really trying to get back to their world, Planet 10, and take over that world. But the protagonists in this movie, they're given the ability to see the aliens in disguise and be able to try to frustrate the aliens on Earth from accomplishing their mission. The aliens in this movie are called lectroids. They're divided into two groups, the black lectroids and the red lectroids. And they're from Planet 10. Having aliens from Planet 10 gives it that B-movie feel. That is on purpose, I think. And I thought that's something else that I found delightful. I think they're alluding to the concept that Planet 10 is the 10th planet in this solar system. This is, of course, back when Pluto was considered Planet 9 before it was demoted. Interestingly enough, scientists think that there may be a Planet 10 beyond Pluto somewhere out there because of the way the orbits of some of the objects past Pluto, their orbits are weird, and they're guessing that there's probably a fairly large planet out past Pluto somewhere, and they haven't found it yet. Probably not going to find it, but they're going to keep looking for it. I wonder what they would call it if they do actually find it. I wonder if they would call it Planet 10 in honor of Buckaroo Banzai. There are also a lot of things that I had questions about. So, like I mentioned earlier, this movie was very complex. So there were things that I felt like there were plot elements that could have been simplified or wasn't quite necessary. So one of the plot elements was, there was a part of the story where the story begins with Buckaroo Banzai being in surgery, and he's late for his test of his rocket car. And I felt like that was unnecessary. Like we didn't need that scene. I think they wanted to show that scene to show all of the facets of Buckaroo Banzai. They wanted to show him as a physician, they wanted to show him as a physicist, and they wanted to show him as a musician. They wanted to get all that in the film because they wanted to impress upon the audience what a genius Buckaroo Banzai is. But the problem is that they already told us all this information when they did the opening blurb of the movie. they had an exposition written down for us to read in the beginning of the movie. So I don't feel that they needed to reiterate that. And if they really did need to reiterate it, they could have handled that in a montage, either in the beginning of the film or in the middle of the film. They could have had a montage of some sort to show all of the things that Dr. Banzai was doing. But instead, they kind of jammed this weird scene in the beginning. And I just felt that it was unnecessary. I guess it also established how he kind of recruits for his band. And that's where he recruits the man that's later known as New Jersey. But I don't think that scene was necessary. Is well, because it makes the movie unnecessarily complex. The movie is already complex because of the aliens among us. Makes it complex enough where you don't need to make it more complex than it already is, because it's teetering on convolution, and that's what I felt about that. The other part that I thought was convoluted was there's a scene later on in the middle of the movie where Buckaroo and his band, they're playing at a club, and the Buckaroo stops the music so he can shine a light on this mysterious woman. And then later it turns out that this woman is his ex-wife's lost twin sister. I think that's a lot. And I'm not sure, at first I got the impression that his ex-wife had passed away, was dead, was killed or murdered or something like that. But it's ambiguous. I'm not exactly sure if his wife had been killed or if his wife had just left him. They don't come out and say that she had been killed. So I'm not exactly sure what happened to his wife. But now he met this woman who turns out to be the twin sister of his wife. She doesn't know she had a twin, and that she's discovering this for the first time. But I feel like that's an unnecessary complexity. It's it feels a little too contrived. There's no humor in it. It's not funny. It's just, oh, so we're doing this now? That's the way it feels. So I don't think that they could have done one of two things. They could have just made this a stranger that Buckaroo was fascinated with, just a strange woman that he felt good about. And then she's there's a point in the movie where she's brilliant for a second, but it's out of context with her character, it seems. And they're just using her ultimately as a damsel in distress. So that all felt contrived. And it's like I said, there's nothing funny about it. There's no humor in it. If they had made her presence in the movie funny somehow, then it wouldn't have mattered if it made sense or not. But they didn't manage to cram any humor in her storyline. So they could have made her a complete stranger, or they could have just made her his wife, or maybe his estranged wife, and he discovered her once again in the bar, and they where he's playing as a band, and they get back together. They could have, I think that would have been a more interesting story if that was his estranged wife and they found a way to get back together, instead of making her this mysterious woman that he discovered was his ex-wife's twin sister. I think what they wanted to do was to show how brilliant he was in discovering that it was his ex-wife twin sister. But if it's an identical twin, then it's not like he's going to have a hard time figuring out who she was. They could have built a more interesting mystery into the movie to show how brilliant Buckaroo Banzai is, but there is no interesting mystery. It's just a woman that's kind of crammed haphazardly in the movie, and I just wish they had done a better job. At first, I was confused about the red electroids. That was another question I had, because at first I was thinking, because you had Dr. Lizardo, and he begins his test, and I want to say that he started his test in maybe the 1940s or the 1950s. He's doing this test to go into the 8th dimension, and his test doesn't go as well. He gets infected or possessed by one of the red lectroids. It doesn't seem like any other of the red lectroids has the ability to possess somebody. It's not demonstrated or shown, or maybe they just never had the opportunity. The red lectroids are trapped in the 8th dimension because they've been imprisoned there. It's kind of like the Phantom Zone, I guess, from Superman. The impression that we get is that all of the red lectroids are imprisoned in this dimension. But when we see Dr. Lizardo later in the 1980s, he's calling his colleagues, his other colleagues, the other red lectroids. And so I was confused. It's like, if all of the red lectroids are trapped in the 8th dimension, where are these? How did these other lectroids get out of the 8th dimension? And then this is why it was important for me to watch the movie the second time, because in the second time I realized that they were telling us where the red lectroids come from. Apparently, the physical red lectroids had been on Earth for a long time, like long before Dr. Lizardo, at least 20 years before Dr. Lizardo became possessed by one of the red lectroids called Lord John Worfen. He's actually the leader of the red lectroids. So when I think it was like the 1930s, I think it was 1938, you had the War of the World broadcast that had scared people allegedly into thinking that real Martians had come to Earth. And it was a radio program by Orson Welles. And then they all found out that it was a hoax. There were no actual Martians on Earth. There was also an electrical event. So it was actually the guy in New Jersey who figured out that the War of the Worlds broadcast was a cover that the red lectroids who were trapped in the 8th dimension used to get some of them out. There was some sort of electrical interference, some kind of electrical storm that caused a breach in dimensions temporarily to allow some of the red lectroids to get out. And then some of those, it was like maybe 30 or 40 of these red lectroids. So they got out and they started a company called Yo-Yo Dying. And that company is what eventually led to Lord John Worfen escaping from his facility. And the whole time, what Yo-Yo Dying was doing was constructing a vehicle so that they could get into the 8th dimension, rescue the rest of their comrades, and then get back to Planet 10 and take over Planet 10. And I got all of that from watching the movie the second time, because most of that kind of went over me the first time I watched the movie. This is definitely one of those movies that you will benefit from watching a couple of times. There's some of my favorite parts of the movie. Getting to that, basically all the visuals of Buckaroo Banzai doing the dimensional test. He goes through with his test of traveling through the 8th dimension. The visuals and the visual effects, the way that whole scene was set up with Buckaroo Banzai getting ready, gets into his rocket car. The rocket car looks fantastic. He goes down, he's traveling at 500 miles per hour. Then he goes past the sound barrier. And then he activates his equipment in the car and shoots out a dimensional beam. And then he goes through a mountain and he's in the 8th dimension. And he sees all of these weird and fantastic things in the 8th dimension. And then he comes out on the other side of the mountain and he discovers that he picked up some things that were in the 8th dimension and brought it into the physical world. At first he discovers some ectoplasm on the car. And then he discovers like a living thingamajig that was on the drive shaft of his car. And that whole scene, it was just a fantastic scene that had happened. It was thrilling and it looked exciting. It was, I just loved the way it was shot. One of the questions I had about that scene in particular, though, is that this test was being witnessed by the Army. So I got the impression that this was at least partially sponsored by the U.S. government. But for some reason, he didn't share the purpose of the test with the Army. Like, the Army was there when I was watching the scene. I got the impression that the Army just thought that this was a speed test. They were testing a fast vehicle to see if a land vehicle can go up to 500 miles per hour. But they did not know that this was actually a test to see if Dr. Banzai can cross over to the eighth dimension. He was actually continuing the test of his predecessors. He was going to do a successful version of this test, where the previous test was only a partial success. But I didn't understand why that needed to be a secret, why he kept that a secret from the Army. And the reason that it doesn't make any sense for him to keep that a secret from the Army is because, for one, it seems like he was fully funding this test. Like, they were there as witnesses, but he owned the rocket car and he had a fairly successful company. So there was no suggestion that the U.S. government was funding this project. It seemed like it was being funded by Buckaroo Banzai. Maybe it was partially funded. None of that is clear. But for whatever reason, he had the U.S. military as witnesses to this test. So if he was going to do this test and he had them as witnesses, why not tell them what the test was actually for? Why hide aspects of the test? That didn't make any sense. Because as he was going down driving his rocket car, and after he crossed over to 500 miles per hour, he went off track and then started heading for the mountains. And it's like it didn't seem like a lot of the people in the military knew what was going on, but his team knew what was going on. There was a moment when Dr. Hikita surreptitiously uncovered a piece of equipment to monitor Buckaroo's progress. So if this was like an open test where everybody knew what was going on, that piece of monitoring equipment would not have been hidden. So, and then, you got the people asking questions like, what are you doing, Buckaroo? Where are you going? What's going on here? Like, there were too many people that were out of the loop to make me think that everybody knew what was going on. And plus, he had very obviously gone off track and gone through the mountain. And only afterwards did he explain what he was doing to everybody. To the people who were invited to witness the test, it was explained to them what he was doing. And then he goes on the news, he's in the media, and he's explaining to the media everything that he had done, that he had went into the mountain and he crossed into the eighth dimension, and he was on the news, and later on he had a press conference about it. It's not like he was keeping the whole thing a secret the whole time. It was just as he was doing the test, he was keeping that part of the test of crossing the eighth dimension as a secret. I didn't understand why that was necessary. It was, again, another unnecessary complexity. Maybe when they were creating the script, it was intended to stay a secret, but it didn't stay a secret. So it seemed unnecessary. I think they could have built tension just by letting us know that he was going to cross the eighth dimension, and there was a lot of questions as to whether or not that test was going to work. And if they built the tension that way, I think it would have worked better than having the convolution of him hiding the purpose of the test only to explain what the test was after the test was completed. Anyways, after he completes the test and he goes on the news and he tells everybody about the test and how he was successfully crossed the eighth dimension, you had Lectroids, the black Lectroids, monitoring from space, seeing that he crossed over to the eighth dimension. And then you had the red Lectroids, specifically Lord Worfen. I don't think the other red Lectroids are monitoring. It's just Lord Worfen. He's watching the news and he sees that Buckaroo Banzai successfully crossed over and came on the other side of a mountain by way of the eighth dimension. And because Lord Worfen wants to go into the eighth dimension to get his comrades, he's very interested in his test. Buckaroo was able to do this with this object called the overthruster. And Lord Worfen has built his own overthruster. He built it in a mental facility that he was staying at. The problem is that even though Lord Worfen has an overthruster, it's not calibrated correctly. Like he doesn't have all of the calculations necessary for it to work right. But he sees that Buckaroo was able to successfully cross over the eighth dimension. So Buckaroo obviously has an overthruster, and Buckaroo obviously has the right calculations to get through the eighth dimension. So now he plans to steal the overthruster from Buckaroo Banzai and use it to carry out his plans. Speaking of Lord Worfen, he's another one of my favorite things about this movie. John Lithgow does a fantastic job of playing Lord Worfen. I think that maybe he was one of the inspirations for Jim Carrey, because this looks like a type of acting that Jim Carrey would do. Or maybe there's some cross references with Robin Williams. I feel like Robin Williams would do the same type of acting job as John Lithgow. And I don't know who influenced who, but John Lithgow does a fantastic job of playing Lord Worfen. He's the funniest part of the movie. He's very entertaining. His accent is ridiculous. And I didn't even realize that it was supposed to be an Italian accent until later on. But I mean, I guess the clue is his name is Emilio Lizardo. But I don't know. I think I suspected that was Spanish, but it could just as easily be Italian. So he was just super entertaining in this movie. His antics were bananas, and his movements were precisely alien. He was just a joy to watch. My favorite line in this movie was when Lord Worfen said, well, let me set it up. So there's a scene in the movie where Lord Worfen, he's in a mental institution. People think that he's Dr. Emilio Lizardo. They don't know that he's been possessed by Lord John Worfen, the Red Lectroid. So he's in his mental institution. He's gathering his things because he is determined to leave the mental institution. Like, he's seen that Buckaroo Banzai has crossed into the eighth dimension. So now he can put his plan into place. So he starts to get ready to leave the mental institution. You know, he puts on his favorite coat. He's gathering all of his things. He's getting his overthruster. And then one of the orderlies is like, where do you think you're going? And, you know, Lord Worfen says, I'm about to leave. I'm about to join my brethren, and I'm about to go home. And the orderly just kind of laughed at him. And, you know, like, yeah, okay, whatever. And here's my favorite line. It's better than no matter where you go, there you are. The line that Lizardo / Lord Worfen responds with is, laugh while you can, monkey boy. I love that line. That is fantastic. Laugh while you can, monkey boy, alluding to the concept of humans evolving from the common ancestors of chimps and apes. The alien designs were fantastic. This goes for the alien designs of the Lectroids themselves and the technology they use. That they use like a more of a biological, asymmetrical technology. Like when you see their ships, their ships looks like insect hives, and they're not symmetrical for the most part at all. And it's a nice looking design concept. I mean, you go inside of their ships, it's more like a biological being. I'm pretty sure that these spaceships are more like cyborgs. I'm pretty sure that they're half biological and half mechanical objects. The weapons that they use are also have this semi-biological and electronic / mechanical feel to it. I loved all of that. The Lectroids, they felt original, and then they kind of enhanced how their strangeness, especially Carl Lumbly. Carl Lumbly, like when he moves around, he's got this. He's he's more alien than some of the other Lectroids, especially the red Lectroids that have been on Earth. The red Lectroids, they're still strange, but they follow more of a human mannerism. But Carl Lumbly as John Parker, he's like shaking all the time. He's shaking and he's staring. That's basically how he moves about the world. It's just a unique design. Even though they divide it into red Lectroids and black Lectroids, you really can't tell the difference between. It's like, I don't know if that's what they're called because they're supposed to be colored red and colored black. It's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two, except for the fact that the black Lectroids are all the human disguise that they use are Jamaicans, like, or Caribbean. Like they all look like Black Caribbean people. And I get the impression that they're all being played by Jamaicans. And that is the look that they have chosen when they come on Earth. They speak like Jamaicans. The dress that they use is just crazy. Like whatever, it's like a closet threw up on them. Like what they just wear whatever clothing. And because they're being played by black people, you can see the black features through their makeup. So you can kind of tell in that way the difference between the black Lectroids and the red Lectroids, who are different because for the most part, like the main red Lectroids that you see in the movie are the weirdest looking people. Like John Hedaya is a weird looking person. Like he and then he can look weirder if he wants to. Or Vincent Scavelli, he's a famously weird looking person. And these guys are playing the red Lectroids, and you can kind of see their features through the makeup, but oftentimes you also see their real faces. So, and there are a number of weird looking people playing the red Lectroids. There are some normal looking people, but they're minor characters. But the main characters that are red Lectroids are weird looking people. They're primarily Caucasian people playing the red Lectroids. And I think they're using that to do a play on racial dynamics. I think that they're referencing like white supremacy because the red Lectroids the leader, John Worfen, was compared to Hitler, and that he is a terrible tyrant, and he was once tried to take over Planet 10, and then the freedom-loving people of Planet 10 defeated him and the red Lectroids, and they put all the red Lectroids in the 8th dimension as imprisonment. So I think that this is what they're trying to impress us with. And that's why they divide it into red and black. I guess red in reference to, they're referencing rednecks. Maybe that's what they're doing. I'm not hip to the thought process of what they were thinking when they came up with the red Lectroids and the black Lectroids. But the black Lectroids are all played by black people. And so it's very obvious on that end. So it's a very interesting dynamic. But I do love the designs of these aliens, and I love the design of their technology. I love the acting in this film also. It's one of my favorite parts. The acting is particularly by John Lithgow, I remember him, but also the earnestness with which Peter Weller played Buckaroo Banzai. I also really liked Carl Lumbly and the way the alienness of all the Lectroids, he felt the most alien. I enjoyed the other red Lectroids that we've seen, or the like Christopher Lloyd and Vincent Scavelli and Dan Hayeta. They just had some goofy lines, and the lines were humorous. Like I said, not necessarily haha funny, but it was their lines were humorous. And there's a running joke with Christopher Lloyd's character in particular. So Christopher Lloyd played the character named John Big Booty, and he preferred to be called Big Booty, even though this is not his real name. This is like a name that he adopted to be on Earth, Or maybe this is some sort of adaptation of their lectroid names. They all have the first name John. Both the black lectroids and the red lectroids have the first human name John, but then they have different, various goofy last names. But it seems like they take their last name seriously. So I'm starting to think these names are adaptations of their real alien names. So throughout the movie, Worfen and other characters, or they refer to John Big Booty as John Big Booty. It was like, John Big Booty, do this. John Big Booty, do that. We got to go get John Big Booty. And near the end of the film, he becomes really annoyed. It's like he starts to correct people. He says, no, it's John Big Booty. It's John Big Booty. And people just kind of ignore him, especially Lord Worfen, because Lord Worfen is his leader. And there's a point where, and this is another one of my favorite parts near the end of the movie. This is when Lord Worfen, he's gotten into his spaceship. He tried to get the formulations that he needed from Buckaroo Banzai in order to get his overthruster to work, but he was unable to get these calculations. So instead of using Buckaroo Banzai's calculations, he's just going to use his overthruster to get into the eighth dimension. Now, John Big Booty does not believe this is going to work. At first, he tells Lord Worfen that, like, you could tell, like, near the end of the movie that John Big Booty is starting to have quite enough of Lord Worfen. They were supposed to kill the girl. They were supposed to kill Pretty Penny. And it was actually John O'Connor. So John O'Connor has Pretty Penny strapped to this device, and he was going to take this slime creature, and he was going to slide this slime creature down a ramp and let it attack Pretty Penny. And he wanted to watch Pretty Penny suffer and die. And in the middle of this torture, where he was about to set the creature up to get on top of Pretty Penny, John Big Booty comes in and he says, leave her alone. We got to go. We got to get to the ship and get ready to get off the planet. And John O'Connor says, but John Worfen said we could kill her. And John Big Booty, having quite enough of John Worfen, says, I think he says something like, fuck John Worfen and the horse he rode in on. Like that's how he's starting to get tired of John Worfen. So John O'Connor and John Big Booty, they leave Pretty Penny to her fate. It's like John O'Connor puts this slime creature on this slide or this ramp, and the ramp leads directly to Pretty Penny's face. He wanted to watch the creature attack Pretty Penny, but he doesn't get to watch her die. And so he's kind of disappointed in that. So he just puts the slime creature on this ramp, and then he leaves with John Big Booty, and they go to the ship. The ship that's supposed to take him through the eighth dimension and then to Planet 10. When they get to the ship, it's John Worfen. He's at the pilot seat. He's getting everything ready. He's installed his overthruster, and the entire time, John Big Booty is complaining. At first, he says, "This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. This, your contraption is shit." And then John Worfen says, Big Booty, he says Big Booty. He keeps calling them Big Booty. Like when he installs the overthruster, he says, Big Booty, install the overthruster, and Big Booty, do this. Big Booty, do that. Big Booty is strapped to a different device that's designed to operate the ship somehow. And as they're getting ready to cross over to the eighth dimension, John Big Booty says, this device is shit. It's not going to work. Your device is shit. And then Lord Worfen says, John Big Booty, you're a coward and you'll never amount to anything, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And then this is when John Big Booty basically loses his shit and he goes, it's Big Booty, because Lord Worfen is calling him Big Booty all this time. And Big Booty insists that his name is Big Booty, Big Booty. And Lord Warfin, having quite enough of John Big Booty, turns around and shoots him and kills him. And and somebody else takes over John Big Booty's position. Of course, this fails. Well, the test fails. Like, John Big Booty was right. They don't cross over to the 8th dimension. And they end up just flying over New Jersey. They completely failed in everything that they tried to do. So that was funny. That was one of the moments I laughed out loud. I know I didn't. You're not laughing at this right now. I get it. You have to see it. You have to see it to see how funny it is. Another thing that I liked, the last thing I'll cover is one of my favorite things, is that there are a lot of small inside jokes. And this is another value in watching it twice, is that when you watch it a second time, you can catch a lot of the inside jokes. Like, there was one inside joke where the Buckaroo Banzai and his gang, they break into Yo-Yo Dine. Remember, Yo-Yo Dine is a company that was set up by the Red Lectroids, and they suspect that no human has ever been inside of Yo-Yo Dine. It's always been totally run by the Red Lectroids. So they go inside the facility, and this is the facility where they're building this spaceship. And it's a troop carrier. It's the ship that's supposed to carry them into the 8th dimension, as I've been saying. And as they're going to the facility, there's a constant drone of this announcer saying something like, John Warfin must live, the Black Lectroids must die, work, work, work. So this constant announcement going. And then after the alarm goes off and they discover that the Hong Kong Cavaliers have infiltrated their facility, there's an announcement that goes, warning, there are monkey boys in the facility. Warning, there are monkey boys in the facility. So I thought that was funny, because when you first hear monkey boy, you kind of think that it's an off-the-cuff insult that was coming from John Warfin. But when you hear this warning, when you hear this announcement at the end of the movie, you realize that monkey boy is just the Lectroids' way of talking about human beings. And that's funny. And then there's another small joke where one of the characters, he enters a restricted room, and that the room is restricted access because there's a sign on the door that says, or it says something like, don't come in here, secret. But all of the words are spelled wrong, and particularly the word come is spelled C-U-M-Z. Don't comes in here. And that was funny, because that's obviously an inside joke, because the way they spell come. So that was funny. I didn't catch it the first time. I caught it the second time. And then they spell secret wrong, because they're carrying on the theme that, they're just using letters, and they don't care how things are spelled. But I think it was a way of hiding. They spelled secret wrong as a way of hiding the first joke, the way they spelled come wrong. Or did they spell it right? Did they mean to spell it that way? I think that's what makes it funny. Yeah, it was just a lot of inside jokes like that. I'm sure that if I watch it a third time, I'll catch some more jokes. But they were really clever in hiding some of these jokes, and this movie could have been vastly improved if they had added more jokes, added more obvious jokes, and if it was not so unnecessarily complex. There's also a quote at the end of the movie that I was never able to figure out. And that quote is at the very end of the movie. I think it's the very last line of the movie, after everybody is victorious. One of the Black Lectroids says, "So what? Big deal." I don't know what that means. I even after watching the movie twice, I don't know what that means. This is after Pretty Penny had been put in jeopardy. They rescue Pretty Penny. Like, I think the slime creature actually got on her, but you had New Jersey, who is also a physician, and he was going to try to rescue and revive Pretty Penny while Buckaroo Banzai and the rest of the gang go stop the red Lectroids. But at the end of the movie, New Jersey says, I did all I can. He says this to Buckaroo Banzai, I did all I can. And the Buckaroo Banzai goes over to see Pretty Penny, where she's apparently dead. There's a thing with Buckaroo Banzai is that when he was given the ability to see the Lectroids for what they were, hiding in disguise, he also is shocking everybody who touches him. And so, like, people try to touch him and he shocks them, so he can't really touch anybody. But when he goes over at the end of the movie to Pretty Penny, he kneels over to start to kiss her, and there's an electric arc between him and her. He's shocking her, and he ends up shocking her back to life. And then after this happens, that's when you go up to the aliens in space, and that's when he says, "So what? Big deal." And I don't know what that has to do with anything. It's almost like they didn't know how they wanted to end the movie, or maybe it's another inside joke that I don't get. I don't know. Maybe somebody who is a fan of Buckaroo Banzai can tell me what that means, because I would really like some insight on that. So those are the things that I liked, and also some of the things I noticed about Buckaroo Banzai. What are your thoughts? What do you have to say about this cult classic, Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension? Let me know. Please send me an email. Let me know on social media. Or if you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the YouTube comments. Let me know what are your thoughts on this incredible movie. So I am done talking about my favorite parts. So let's talk about the trivia top 10. As usual, I get most of the trivia from IMDb. So let's get started. There is a scene in the movie where Reno, Pepe Sherma, and New Jersey, Jeff Goldblum, go through a room with a watermelon in a machine that was really out of place for the scene. New Jersey asks, "What's that watermelon doing there?" And Reno explains, "I'll explain it later." In a Blu-ray audio commentary, filmmakers explained that they had a confrontational relationship with one of the producers when they stopped receiving notes from the production. They decided to put the watermelon in the scene with no mention about it anywhere in the script. When they received no questions about it, they deduced that no one was screening the dailies anymore, and they could keep making the film the way they wanted as long as they remained within the budget, which is a shame. Maybe the producers do have some valuable input. Here's the thing. There is a lot of consternation about studio interference, about how certain movies don't do well. They'll say, well, if the studio hadn't interfered, the movie would have been better, or the story would have been better, or the producers got into the way of the director's vision, or they'll say stuff like, the producers aren't creative, they only care about the money. But the thing about it is that a lot of times the producers are artistically inclined. Like, a lot of directors, a lot of writers become producers. There are a lot of actors that become producers. So their producers aren't necessarily devoid of creativity. Studio interference doesn't always tank a film. Sometimes studio interference is quite necessary. So, and this may be an example of a proper communication and cooperation between the creatives and the studio might have improved the prospects of this movie. I'm just thinking that it might have. It's what we see here is that the breakdown of communication between the creative side and the studio side is probably what had contributed to this movie not being as successful or financially successful as it could have been. And it shows that this is a valuable relationship to have. It's like, I don't think that we need to necessarily decry the studio's involvement in the movie. It is, after all, their money. So it's not always a bad thing for studios to be involved in the creative process. According to Peter Weller, he had a particularly tough time filming a scene, without laughing, where Lord John Warfin, aka Dr. Lizardo, is torturing Buckaroo with electricity, because it was the first time that he, that being Peter Weller, had heard John Lithgow perform what Weller refers to as John's Italian/Martian accent. Yeah, I can imagine doing that scene and hearing John Lithgow for the first time. I can imagine how incredibly funny that might have been. The movie's ending invites the viewer to watch for the upcoming film Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. This was the title for a sequel that Sherwood Studios planned to make if this film had been successful. Unfortunately, it was a box office bomb, and Sherwood Studios went bankrupt. However, after its release on video and cable, the film became a cult favorite, much in the same way as Mad Max, which crawled from obscurity to spawn 2 sequels. Legal wrangling due to the bankruptcy prevented any other studios from picking up the sequel rights, and even many years later, MGM had to fight through a pile of red tape simply to get the okay to re-release it on home video DVD. In 2021, the novel Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League was finally released. I did not realize that it was released just a couple of years ago. It was released in 2021. I had not heard of this, and I feel like maybe I should go check it out. In the original script, Buckaroo was supposed to have an arch enemy named Hanoi Zan, who was never seen but referenced to by Buckaroo and the other characters. All scenes containing dialogue regarding Zan were deleted from the film's theatrical release, but are now available on DVD. Zan was supposed to be the mysterious head of a crime syndicate called the World Crime League, and also the man who murdered Buckaroo's parents and wife Peggy. So here, or I suspect that in earlier versions of the script, they would have had definitively said that Buckaroo Banzai's wife was killed. However, it feels like the version of the movie I watched, the fate of his wife was a little bit ambiguous, and maybe they was alluding to that she was murdered, or maybe they would explain it when they got to the sequel, if they were to ever have a sequel. I've not seen the version that has all of the lines restored, so I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. I'm afraid that if I were to see a version of the movie where they're talking about this mysterious crime lord, it would be even more convoluted than it already is. John Lithgow's dialect coach, Roberto Terminelli, was a tailor on the 20th Century Fox lot with a heavy Italian accent. John had Ricardo speak his lines from the script into a tape recorder, which he then used to practice the accent. John then got him credit in the movie as the dialect coach for his role. That's interesting. I wonder how authentic John Lithgow's accent is. I have no way of judging. I'd really like to know. If you're an Italian and you are listening to this podcast, please let me know if John Lithgow's dialect or if his accent was authentic to you. Or if you live in an Italian neighborhood in America, let me know if John Lithgow's accent in this movie was authentic. I have no way of judging. It sounds really funny and strange. It would have been better if John Lithgow had gotten a proper dialect coach instead of just repeating what he heard Roberto Terminelli say. But that's an interesting technique for figuring out your character. And I'm just glad that he did all of that. He went the extra mile to give his character some extra depth. In one scene, Reno refers to Orson Welles as the guy from the old wine commercials. This was a reference to Welles' popular television commercials in the 1970s for the Paul Mason Winery now known as Mountain Winery, where he used the slogan, "We will sell no wine before it's time." In the early 1980s, Wells was fired from the advertising campaign after stating on a U.S. talk show that he never drank the company's wine. I remember these commercials. That commercial used to be in the zeitgeist. It was a meme, as far as memes in the 1980s. It was something that, it was part of the monoculture. If you saw a comedian reference that, or if you saw it referenced on a TV show, you knew exactly what they were talking about. Because back in the day, we couldn't skip commercials. We had to watch those commercials. The best that we could do is walk out of the room when a commercial was on. But even when you walked out of the room, you could still hear the commercials. Commercials were unskippable. You had to embrace them joints. But the commercials were very entertaining. Like, commercials are challenged now. Like, they have to be more entertaining than ever before. And sometimes some commercials break through the zeitgeist, but nothing like back in the day. Overall concept and several names appear to be taken from the Doc Savage pulp magazines of the 1930s and 1940s. Both main characters are multi-talented surgeons, adventurers, and musicians, and both have an inner circle of sidekicks with names or with nicknames. Rennie, Ham, Monk, Long Tom, and Johnny compared to Reno, New Jersey, Perfect Tommy, and Rawhide. Most of the band playing with Buckaroo Banzai is Billy Vera and the Beaters, and this band has had appearances on movies like The Accused, A Fine Mess, and Blind Dates. So I was alluding to there being another original song. I believe that the first rock song that Buckaroo Banzai and his Hong Kong Cavaliers played was one of the original songs that was played by the Beaters. This original song doesn't have any lyrics. It's just a rad instrumental. It's a rad like rock song instrumental that they play when they first get on stage, and then they switch to the original song that's actually sung by Peter Weller. The oscillation overthruster is the main MacGuffin for this film, and it's used to send objects into the 8th dimension. This prop has reappeared in other films. It was used as a spectral analyzer in the film Pen Pals, and it can also be seen in Star Trek First Contact on the bulkhead of Zephyrin Cochrane's ship when he, William Riker, and Geordi LaForge launch on his ship. It's right next to Commander Riker's head. And that's actually one of my favorite movies. It's one of the best Star Trek movies. And now I feel I gotta go rewatch it so I can see if I can spot this object. The kanji lettering on Buckaroo Banzai's headband as he drives the jet car reads, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Hesekubai, which appears to be Japanese but does not make sense. The first two kanji meaning living or lifestyle, but the second character, bai, which is meant to be beautiful, does not add up to coherent Japanese. It seems to suggest the beautiful life, but these three kanji together do not have a particular meaning in Japanese. This is the trap that people fall into when they try to translate certain Asian languages without having a proper translator to be able to tell them what certain characters mean. Because I've been looking at Japanese language TikTok, and the way they write language and the way they speak languages is so different from the way Western languages are constructed that you can't do the type of translation that we do with Western languages. Like, you can take a word in Spanish and you could translate it to English because the words are very similar. They're almost the same. Like the word perfecto and perfect, they're almost the same word. Western languages follow a very similar syntax. We use all the same letters, There are some extra letters in some languages, like there are extra letters in Russian, but they're recognizable as letters. But the writing system in Asian languages, like especially Japanese or Chinese or Korean, they're so different from the way we construct words in Western languages that you just can't take words and directly translate them. Or you can't take words that you think have one meaning and translate them from English to Japanese and expect them to have the same meaning. And this is the trap that people fall into when they get tattoos with Japanese or Chinese or Korean letters and they don't speak those languages. And then you get stuff that don't make sense. It's gobbledygook. It don't make sense to you because you can't read the language. It don't make sense to the person who actually understands the language because it's not something that they would say or something that would make perfect sense. You come off sounding like somebody who's just babbling, except you're babbling in somebody else's language. And so if you're going to get a tattoo with Asian characters, or if you're going to get like a sign or a poster or something like that, you should get somebody you trust who knows the language, who knows how to read and write the language, to look at that and say, and give you a no or no go. It's like somebody needs to tell you no sometimes. Like, no, don't get that tattoo. You don't know what it says. Don't do it. And so that's all for the trivia. And now let's head over to the critics' thoughts. The critics give it a relatively high score at 67%. The audience score is 69%, which is fantastic. And this is on Rotten Tomatoes. On IMDb reviews, we have it at 6.2 out of 10. So this is kind of, there's a consistent thread with these ratings. Janet Maslin, a video review, wrote, unmistakably tongue-in-cheek, the movie follows Buckaroo, Peter Weller, to the frontier of ultra-hip sci-fi parody. John Lithgow gets a chance to pull out all stops as a mad scientist, and when things are funny, they're very much so. So yeah, I can see how some people will find this movie extraordinarily funny. I only found it sort of funny. I did laugh out loud, I want to say exactly twice. And the rest was humorous. Most of it was just interesting. And I still found myself invested in the film. Jolie Siegel from Washington City Paper wrote, the movie makes such large demands on one's powers of concentration, and yet, when all of its threads have been followed and its odysseys assembled, all one is left with is a junk construction. Now, I slightly disagree. I do think there are some extra parts on this project that didn't need to be there, and it does take a lot of concentration, but I do think it leads to something. Like you have an opponent that has an objective. You have to stop him from reaching his objective, and that's like the basic story. And I think it follows that basic story pretty well. Chance Solom Pfeiffer from Willamette Week wrote, the vast, delirious joke of W.D. Richter's sci-fi comedy is that it plays like the 189th issue of a comic that actually has no prior issues. You know what? I think that's right on. That's spot on. That's right on target. I agree with this wholeheartedly. Lastly, Matt Brunson from Film Frenzy wrote, it's easy to see the appeal. What with its loopy characters, its loopy plot, and its loopy dialogue, it's just a shame that there's not more lurking underneath all that surface quirk. And I kind of agree with them there. I think there could have been more. There could have been more jokes. I think they could have had less complexity in the actual plot and implanted more jokes. I think that would have made this movie so much better. Like a great movie that's like a simple plot, but it doesn't matter because it's filled with jokes, is Back to the Future. It came out around the same time. Back to the Future is almost a perfect movie because of how funny it was, the pace of the movie, and how it knew what its objectives were, also starring Christopher Lloyd. Finally, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension is, as of this recording, available on Prime Video. My next episode is yet another classic sci-fi comedy cult classic. This is another movie that I've not thoroughly seen from beginning to end, but I've always liked it. It's high time that we talked about a much-beloved sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Excellent! You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.